Okay, so second part of this video, we covered in the first part the towel notes, and we covered about some of the dynamics of how the suspension of the skins are on this barrel. Now, for the bass notes, they're a little more complex because we're going to be going through another thing with the bass. Just to mention before we start, is you really have to take care of the bass side of the drum, because if the skin gets too dry, personally, I was always told never, never leave your drum just sitting around on its side. Why? Because this masala is going to run down and make marks, and it's going to masala has to be a perfect circular patch inside the drum in order to retain its function. I personally, the masala I use doesn't run that much, and I don't like too much masala in a drum anyways, because I find that in order to play with finesse, you end up losing the ability to play with fine touches if you're using so much strength to be digging into the skin. To each their own. Some people are power drummers, have stronger hands, whatever the case is. I do not leave this drum sitting on a carpet, especially not a shaggy carpet, and not here in Canada, because what it does is it dries out the skin, and then I guess the elastin, collagen, whatever it is in the skin, you start to get this. It sounds like this. You can't even recreate it. Once it's flat, it's just flat. Doesn't bend, it doesn't vibrate, and then you lose that. So why this is important to take care of is because if your bass is off, you have to readjust your whole playing technique and get used to it for that duration until you get it where you want. And when you are playing someone else's drum, some people like to crank up the rings. For classical, people like to keep it a little lower, a little softer. So just, be careful when you're giving your drum to people who like to slather a bunch of powder on it or pull the rings high, whatever the case is. Try to keep the sound. And you know what? Once a bass is put on a drum as well, you don't want to pull it too tight and then unpull it and pull it too tight. It's nice to just keep it neutral, because once you've pulled it too tight, that amount of stretch changes the dynamic of the bass. That's why I wanted to make this as a separate video. Now, if you will see with East Indian Dolaks, this bamboo here is usually, it goes further down. So it's kind of like when you pull it, the bamboo is pulling on the skin more. With skins covered in Trinidad, it's usually about half that. So you'll see that, working with that bamboo is a different thing for each style of skin. This is an East Indian skin, but thankfully it's on the more medium range than one of the deeper ones. There's also the studio style. I don't recommend that. It's where they, instead of just covering the skin over the bamboo, they'll take a rope and they'll rope, so you get a very thick skin. I don't prefer that for classical at all. If you can get skin covered in Trinidad, that's honestly the best. You'll have to take care of it differently when you get to North America, or at least in the northern states and Canadian provinces. But what you want to do is make sure, just take stock of how the masala is, how the skin is feeling. Sometimes it might need oil, it might need sanding. Those are more advanced things, but for the most part, that's out of the way. Now, we have a fundamental difference in Trinidadian bass drumming than playing of the bass than we do in East Indian and even Guyanese tan. Because for those who play tabla, if you're coming from a tabla background, you're going to be used to anchoring your palm somewhere around here before the masala or the gub, and you're going to, aim for right here. That's not bad to know, but for Trinidadian classical, you want to orient your hand this way. You could even hear this drum is a little dry, but what we're doing here is we're aiming. It's almost like a hook. We're aiming to squeeze. So you're pushing down and you're squeezing, and that's where you're getting the sound. Where you'll get the callus is usually around here, and sometimes on your thumb. Now, um, I'm just thinking about how many people do this differently and are going to say, hey, that's not how you do it. This is what I know. You can decide for yourself whether, this is going to work for you or not. And fundamental sounds of the bass are this. So you have the open hand stroke, which is open resonance. I don't use this so much for classical unless you're playing Drupad. This is more for chutney applications. And shouldn't say that. Anyways, we'll see. You have the K. This is closed. Later on, we're going to go into some theory. So just remember, open, closed. Now you have the modulation. As I was saying, if you're used to tabla or Gayanatan, you're going to go like this. Trinidadian, you're going to orient it like this. And now also we have combination sounds. So when you take the na, I'm really trying to stay away from notation just to not mix up tabla and Trinidadian classical. But when you have this na, and you, with this, it's like a, or when you're making this cut sound, this chop sound, you want to make sure you're closing the resonance on this side. Otherwise, you see? So you have these combination sounds, and you also have the open ones. This is not really a thing. Maybe it is for chutney, I guess. But anyways, you can kind of tell I'm just doing this, step by step here, figuring it out as I go. But what else can I tell you? You also have right? So those are the fundamental sounds that you're really going to be using. There's a complex sort of, so why I want to use bows, but also not, is te, ke. Becomes te in this context, te, re, ki, te, te, re, ki, te, te, re, ki, te. And where you're going to be using that is, let's see, but also te, with the ke, also put it all together into one rolling sweep. So if you see with a tilana, so these all have their even, like, that's the more complex, but so if I discover any more notes as I go along, I will try to include them, but I think those are the fundamentals for now.